The forest didn't scream when the sky broke open, but Elliot Granger heard it anyway. Ashwood was the kind of place that didn't welcome noise. Wind whispered instead of howling. Animals watched instead of warning. The trees, tall and ancient, stood like judges around Elliot's cabin, their bark darkened by decades of silence. That night, however, the sky defied their hush. A violent rupture tore through the stars, accompanied by a roar so visceral it made the earth beneath Elliot's boots shudder. Elliot dropped the carved wooden spoon in his hand and stepped outside, his sharp blue eyes narrowing beneath silver brows. At 65, his body bore the weight of choices made in sterile labs and war rooms far from here. He had once worn a white coat under government lights, crafting toxins for classified programs, designing silent killers made of molecules and intent. But those days were long gone. Now, his companions were moss, fireflies, and the occasional snake that slithered too close to his tools. A worn canvas bag rested by the cabin door packed with field knives, vials of neurotoxin distilled from local plants, and a compact rifle designed more for beasts than men. He grabbed it without hesitation. The scent of pine and sulfur mixed in the air. Through the thicket, past his network of handcrafted traps and moss-covered warning signs, he saw a smear of fire streak across the heavens, arching toward the northern ridge. "That's not a storm," he muttered, sliding the rifle over his shoulder. Years in government black labs and classified missions had taught Elliot a few things. Nothing good ever fell from the sky, and if something did, you went in ready to kill it or bury it. The forest grew quieter as he approached the crash site, about a mile from his cabin. Even the cicadas had gone still. Smoke curled above the treetops, tinged with a strange violet hue. He crouched behind a boulder, gaze scanning for movement. The clearing was scorched in a perfect oval, trees bent outward as if repelled by some invisible force. In the center, metal glinted like wet stone under moonlight. It wasn't a plane. It wasn't a satellite. It was something else. Cautiously, Elliot stepped forward. The air tasted of ozone and static. His boots crunched over charred pine needles. Then he saw her. At first, he thought it was a mannequin training prop, perhaps, from some high-tech drill. But then it moved. She lay sprawled on the moss, her body tangled in wires that looked organic, almost like vines. Her skin was pale, tinged with a soft, purplish-blue glow. Not bruised. Not burned. Glowing. He raised his rifle. Her eyes opened. They were silver. No, not silver. Violet. Like backlit amethysts. And wide with something Elliot couldn't quite place. Fear, yes. But also recognition. "Don't," she whispered. The word was broken. The syllables fractured, her voice tinged with static, as if it had traveled across frequencies to reach him. "You speak English?" She winced and tried to rise, only to collapse again. He didn't lower the rifle. "You bleed." She blinked. Then turned her head. Where a jagged piece of wreckage had sliced through her side, there was no blood. Instead, threads of bioluminescent light pulsed from the wound, weaving in and out like living code. Her skin tried to close around it, shimmered, failed, then shimmered again. He stepped back. "Well, shit." She laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "I'm not weapon. Not enemy. Didn't say you were. But you sure as hell ain't local." A low hum began in the wreckage behind her. Something inside the ship, or whatever was left of it, was powering up, cycling through broken systems. Sparks crackled, and a distant pulse echoed into the trees. She flinched. They heard. Coming. They who? But her head dropped. Unconscious, or pretending to be. Either way, Elliot was out of time. He slung his rifle, hesitated only a second, then scooped her up. She was lighter than he expected, warm despite the rain starting to fall. As he moved through the underbrush, branches slapping against his coat, he glanced down. A faint glow shimmered beneath her collarbone. Symbols. No, not symbols, data. Like scrolling code etched into skin. He adjusted his grip. You better not get me killed, alien girl. Somewhere behind them, a distant, mechanical howl pierced the night. Elliot didn't look back. He just ran. Rain pelted the cabin roof in erratic bursts, drumming a chaotic rhythm above Elliot Granger's head as he kicked the door shut behind him. The girl Kalira, though he didn't know her name yet, lay limp in his arms, her pale, shimmering skin glowing faintly in the dim light of his living room. He moved quickly, clearing a workbench cluttered with glass vials and rusted tools, then gently set her down. The cabin looked like a hermit chemist's fever dream. Rows of labeled jars lined the walls, filled with various toxins, dried herbs, and preserved venom sacs. A rigged ventilation system wheezed quietly in the corner. In the center of the room sat a single chair, hand-carved, scorched at the edges from an old fire, and beside it, a crude metal cot that served as both hospital bed and morgue table. He took a breath, wiped rain from his brow, and examined her wound again. Bioluminescent filaments weaved through torn flesh like living stitches trying to reform. The light pulsed faster now, as if reacting to his touch. You don't bleed. You glow, he muttered. Let's hope that's a good sign. Elliot grabbed his sterilized tools, a roll of surgical gauze, and a few drops of paralytic derived from tree frogs. Not to harm her, just to numb whatever pain she might be in. He hesitated before injecting it, unsure how her alien biology might react. Still, it was better than nothing. Her eyes fluttered open as the needle touched her skin. She stared at him, unblinking. You're safe, he said gruffly, not entirely convinced himself. She tilted her head slightly, as if decoding his words in real time. Her lips parted. Signal. Elliot leaned closer. What? Her voice warbled, layered like multiple signals trying to align. Signal source. Strong. Trapped in atmosphere. Her accent was fractured, the vowels off by just enough to sound unnatural. She sounded like a radio trying to mimic speech. How the hell do you even know English? Kalira blinked. Signal, voice of Earth. Learn from light. Radio. Film. Broadcast, primitive, but clear. Elliot frowned. Jesus. You learned our language from reruns and static. Her lips curled in a ghost of a smile. I liked music. A pause. Then she winced and clutched her side. The wound was stabilizing, but barely. Elliot grabbed a rag soaked in his antiseptic formula, more plant than science, and pressed it against her glowing skin. Her muscles tensed, then relaxed. You got a name. She hesitated, then touched her own chest. Kalira. Elliot, he replied. Dr. Granger, if we're being formal. She gave him a puzzled look. He waved it off. Outside, a faint sound broke through the rain, a mechanical whir, low and distant, almost too low to hear. Kalira sat bolt upright. Her eyes flashed. They follow. Elliot froze. Who's they? Kalira stared into the dark window as if it were a screen. Hunters. Not organic. Not clean. Synthetic sentience. They want what I carry. What is it you carry? She touched her collarbone. Beneath her skin, symbols danced like fireflies. Data. Genetic memory. A map of what was lost. Elliot narrowed his eyes. Lost from where? She looked at him now, truly looked, as if measuring something deeper than trust. Viria. My home. Destroyed. I carry seed of what it was. And they want it. Not to revive. To weaponize. Elliot exhaled, long and slow. The air in the cabin had grown heavier. So you're saying, if they get to you, it's not just bad news for your people. It's extinction level for mine. Collier nodded. They come because of me. But they will stay, because of what your world can become. A bolt of lightning lit up the window. In that flash, for just a second, Elliot thought he saw a shape tall, armored, humanoid standing at the edge of the tree line. He moved fast, kicked over the cot, grabbed a metal trunk from under the floorboards and began unloading gear. Traps, toxins, tools, camo netting, a field tablet connected to an old offline satellite map. You're not the first danger to come knocking on my door, he muttered. But you might be the first worth saving. Collier watched him work, eyes glowing faintly. She seemed calmer now. You built all this. With my own regrets, he replied. Each bottle, each trap, each formula, a mistake I'm trying to correct. She looked around, absorbing the makeshift lab, the wild blend of science and instinct. Your people will not believe you? Elliot gave a short laugh. They already don't. That's why I live out here. Outside, the wind changed. The rain softened. And many somethings moved through the forest, without sound, without breath. Elliot locked the final latch on the trapdoor. They are coming. You better be everything you say you are, Collier. She stood slowly, her legs trembling. But her posture was proud. I am the last echo of my world. And I will not be silenced again. He looked at her, half in awe, half in disbelief. Then let's make sure they regret ever landing in Ashwood. In the silence that followed, two exiles, one from Earth, one from the stars, prepared to face a storm neither had seen before. The next morning brought a pale haze that settled low over the forest, turning Ashwood into a living painting of mist and green shadows. The rain had stopped, but the scent of damp earth and tree sap still clung to the cabin walls. Elliot Granger moved through his lab like a man with a purpose, a vial of crushed foxglove in one hand and a rusted heating coil in the other. Collier lay resting on the cot again, her breathing steady, her skin no longer pulsing with distress but still faintly luminous beneath the surface. He had cleaned the wound thoroughly, applied a salve made from spider root and powdered hornbeam, and stabilized her temperature using a solar-powered heat pack salvaged from an old military med kit. Not exactly textbook medicine, but it worked. You should be dead, you know, Elliot muttered without looking at her. But I guess you're not playing by our rules. Collier stirred, eyes slowly blinking open. I adapt. So I see. He glanced at her, noting the increased clarity in her gaze. You feel strong enough to stand. She nodded and rose slowly, stretching joints that moved with alien grace. Her skin had cooled slightly, the glow beneath it dulled to a soft hum. She walked to the center of the room and studied his equipment, old centrifuges powered by bike pedals, fermentation tanks made from converted rain barrels, mason jars labeled in a mix of Latin and Elliot's shorthand. This, primitive but clever? Elliot smirked. You're not the first one to say that. She pointed to a shelf filled with plant samples. All these, for poison? He paused. Not all. Some are for healing. But most, yeah. Collier tilted her head. You make death, from life. That's one way to put it. Elliot moved to his workbench and pulled out a worn sketchbook. Inside were diagrams of traps, some mechanical, others biological. He flipped to a page depicting a spore mine, a small clay orb lined with dried mycotoxin spores that detonated upon proximity to body heat. Collier approached, studying it with interest. This, weapon. Defense, Elliot corrected. I don't go looking for trouble anymore, but I like to be ready. The day passed in quiet productivity. Elliot moved through the forest, collecting certain mushrooms and seed pods, checking traps he'd laid long ago, and resetting them with more urgent parameters. Collier followed at a distance, fascinated by how he blended survivalism with science. He showed her how to identify heat-reactive moss that secreted acidic sap, and how to grind pine resin into a slow-burning fuse. She listened, absorbed, asked questions. It was almost like teaching again. Almost like before. They returned by dusk, both carrying baskets of forest ingredients. Collier set hers down and looked at him with quiet curiosity. You were teacher? Scientist, he said. Researcher. Worked for the Department of Defense. DARPA mostly. Her eyes narrowed. Weapon maker? He flinched but didn't deny it. Instead, he sat down heavily in a worn armchair, rubbing his face with both hands. I didn't start out wanting to make weapons. I studied microbiome, bioengineering, disease modeling. But after September 11th, they wanted more than data. They wanted deterrence. Collier sat across from him on the floor, cross-legged, watching. I created a virus. Non-lethal at first. Meant to disable enemy forces without bloodshed. It worked, until they altered it. Weaponized it in the field. Whole villages went silent. He looked at her, guilt seeping into his features like old ink. I left. Dropped off the grid. Figured I owed the world one less monster. Collier was silent for a long time. Then she said, intent and impact, not always aligned. That an alien proverb? No. Just truth. The fire crackled between them. Outside, night crept in, but for a moment, the cabin felt warm. Human. Alive. You ever wonder why you were spared? She asked suddenly. Elliot looked toward the window. Every damn day. Later that night, Elliot worked on arming a perimeter with his spore mines and tripwire devices. Collier assisted him, learning the process quickly. Her fingers moved with elegance and precision, almost like she had done this before, though not with moss and clay. At one point, as they crouched together setting a thermal trap beneath a fallen log, she glanced at him. Why you trust me? I don't. Not completely. But I trust what I've seen. You're not here to hurt me. And you haven't run. She nodded, accepting that. Then added, and you carry poison in hands, but use it for protection. Elliot chuckled. The man with poisoned hands? That sounds like a bad spy novel. Maybe, she said with a smile, or a good one. The night was deep and thick with forest sounds when they finally returned. In the cabin, Collier stood at the threshold, watching Elliot set the final trap indicator on his tablet. You think it will stop them? Elliot sighed. No. But it'll slow them down. And out here, sometimes slowing is surviving. She turned to him. Then we survive. He nodded, and for the first time in years, Elliot Granger felt something other than regret stirring in his chest. Hope. The first one arrived just before dawn. It didn't fall from the sky like cholera. It didn't scream or roar or break the canopy. It was simply there. A shimmer in the air. A slight distortion at the edge of vision, like heat rising from asphalt. Elliot spotted it first, a flicker against the background of mist and pine. He crouched beside a tree stump, scanning through a cracked monocular lens fitted with an old infrared filter. A human form, tall and angular, emerged from the ripple. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, light folding unnaturally over its armor. One of the hunters. He turned to Collier, who stood a few feet behind him, her breathing steady but shallow. Her eyes were closed, her hands trembling at her sides. "They're here," he said. "I know," she whispered. "I can feel them." Elliot's traps were already set. 100 yards back, deep in the trees, he had laced the forest floor with chemical mines disguised as mushrooms. Closer to the cabin, vines infused with synthesized pheromones would attract stinger beetles he had cultivated in a hollow log. The hunter took a single step forward. That was enough. Elliot clicked a button on the side of his watch. Nothing exploded. Not yet. But a chain of biological signals began to activate. Spores primed, insects agitated, gas sacs expanded with engineered fumes. Collier opened her eyes. "I can disrupt their signals," she said. "But only briefly. And not without cost." He nodded. "We just need a window." She stepped forward, her fingertips glowing faintly, then placed her palms together. A subtle hum filled the air, like distant radio static. The shimmer faltered. The hunter stumbled, its cloaking field fluttering like a broken hologram. Elliot didn't hesitate. He raised a small launcher cobbled together from PVC and a scavenged ignition coil and fired a dart coated in paralytic toxin. It hit. The hunter's body spasmed, its armor twitching with sparks, before collapsing to one knee. But it wasn't dead. Not yet. Elliot cursed. "Collier, now." She exhaled sharply and pushed her palms forward. A pulse of invisible energy surged from her, twisting the very air. The hunter's helmet cracked with a sharp pop, its sensors overwhelmed. It let out a sound mechanical, guttural and raised the weapon. Too slow. Elliot triggered the second trap. From the underbrush, a burst of green mist erupted. The engineered gas, derived from nettle spores and enhanced with neurotoxin, engulfed the hunter. Within seconds, the figure convulsed, dropped its weapon, and crumpled sideways. The forest fell silent again. Collier dropped to one knee. "Are you okay?" Elliot moved to her side. She nodded, but her skin had dimmed. The glow beneath her flesh flickered erratically. "I used too much," she whispered. "They resist adaptation." He helped her to her feet. "That was one. There's more." She looked at him with tired, determined eyes. 3. One is down. Elliot turned toward the cabin. They needed to fall back, regroup. The second hunter wouldn't make the same mistake. They didn't have long. By the time they reached the perimeter of Elliot's central defense zone, the second shimmer had appeared. This one moved faster, more erratically, scanning trees with pulses of infrared light invisible to the human eye but not to Collier. She pointed. "It searches for pulse, not form. Heat and rhythm." Elliot narrowed his eyes. "Then we give it a rhythm to follow." He opened a small case strapped to his thigh and pulled out a palm-sized device. It looked like a music box, but inside, it held a compressed sound emitter loop with Elliot's own heartbeat, recorded during a stress spike. He placed it on a fallen branch, 20 yards from their location. They watched. The hunter locked on and moved. As it approached the decoy, it triggered a pressure plate hidden beneath moss. This time, the explosion was loud. Shrapnel and acid burst outward, cutting through leaves, bark and armor. The hunter staggered, its stealth broken. But it didn't fall. It turned toward the source of the real threat. Collier stepped forward again. Elliot grabbed her arm. "You can't. You're spent." "I must." She closed her eyes. Another pulse. Smaller, weaker. But enough. The hunter's movement stuttered. Just enough time for Elliot to throw a spore mine. It hit the hunter's chest and burst. Fungal threads wrapped around the armor, entering cracks from the previous blast. The mycotoxins acted fast, paralyzing the central joints. The hunter fell. 2 down. Collier collapsed. Elliot caught her, pulled her into the underbrush. Her breath was shallow, skin dimmed to a pale gray. "You hold on," he whispered. "One more." They didn't speak as he carried her back to the cabin. Smoke curled from the edges of the trees. Ashwood was bleeding. He laid her on the cot and rearmed himself. The third hunter didn't shimmer. It didn't sneak. It walked. Armor black as obsidian, eyes glowing red like coals. It was bigger, broader, and faster. A commander. Elliot watched it come. He didn't wait. He led it deeper into the trap zone, letting it chase him between trees marked with barely visible symbols, his own code for kill zone. He ran past an old stump, slapping a copper wire as he passed. The ground erupted. 3 mines detonated in succession: fire, gas, spikes. The commander emerged, wounded but moving. Elliot ducked behind a tree, primed his last bomb, a glass sphere containing a hybrid of napalm and venom sac extract. He waited. When the commander burst through the brush, Elliot hurled the sphere. It shattered against the armor. Flames ignited, followed by a hissing sound. The armor buckled. The creature screamed. And then silence. Ashwood burned. Elliot sank to his knees. Behind him, in the cabin, Collier stirred. The forest breathed. For now, they had survived. The forest smelled of ash and damp earth. Smoke curled in thin trails above the trees, and Elliot Granger stood in his lab, eyes locked on a worn microscope that buzzed and hummed with outdated energy. The battle was over for now, but questions lingered like the haze in the air. Collier slept in the corner, her body curled on the cot beneath the thermal blanket. The glow beneath her skin had returned faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat beneath translucent flesh. Elliot turned back to his workstation. Under the lens, a sample of Collier's blood glimmered. It wasn't blood, not really. It shifted colors, refracted light, moved as if alive. When he applied a temperature change, it split into symmetrical strands and then reformed into a lattice that pulsed with faint, rhythmic flashes. He ran a chemical scan through an old diagnostic device he'd kept from his DARPA days, repurposed for forest chemistry. The readings didn't make sense. Regenerative enzyme activity was off the charts. He leaned back, heart thudding. Cellular regeneration beyond anything he'd ever seen. These enzymes could not only repair tissue but rebuild it entirely. And deeper still, he found traces of encoded protein strands. Markers that could interact with human immune cells, overwrite them, reprogram them. "Holy hell," he whispered. "If applied correctly, This enzyme could cure every degenerative disease known to man. Or make someone virtually immortal. Or if manipulated, accelerate mutation. Turn a living being into something uncontrollable. He pulled up another sample, cross-referencing it with viral structures. There it was again. The third possibility. With the right vector, Cholera's enzyme could become a weapon of mass extinction. He glanced back at her. She stirred and opened her eyes slowly. "You found it." "Yeah," he said. "I found it." Cholera sat up, still pale but alert. "I don't understand it. I only carry it." "You carry the key to everything, Cholera. Life, death, evolution. This isn't just alien biology. This is genetic technology thousands of years beyond ours." She looked down at her hands, her fingers curling as if afraid of what they held. "I was born with it," she said quietly. "They called me a vessel. A guardian of memory. A memory that could wipe us all out," Elliot muttered. Cholera looked up. Her voice hardened. "That's not what it's for. It holds the legacy of Viria. My world's past, its biology, its culture, everything they destroyed. I am the last archive." "Then why didn't they protect you better?" he snapped, louder than he meant to. "Why not lock that kind of power away?" "Because it's not just power. It's identity." He turned away, running a hand through his gray hair. "An identity gets people killed." Silence fell between them. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of charred leaves. A bird called once, then was silent. Cholera rose and approached the table, her eyes scanning the data he had gathered. She absorbed it in seconds. "You want to destroy it?" Elliot didn't answer. She stepped closer. "You're afraid." "I've seen what happens when science outruns morality," he said. "I've seen it twisted, hijacked, turned into something unrecognizable. What you carry could end war or start the last one." Cholera laid a hand on his arm. "And what if it could save you? Heal your world? Restore what you lost?" He looked into her eyes, and for a moment, he didn't see an alien. He saw someone who had lost everything. Someone still holding on. "What do you want to do with it?" he asked. "Protect it. Keep it alive. Let it grow. Let it choose its own future. It's not a person." "No," she said, stepping back. "But I am. And I won't let you destroy the last piece of who I am." Elliot stared at the screen, the enzyme structure rotating endlessly. He saw potential. He saw horror. He saw choice. "Then we need to make a decision," he said. "Together. Because they'll come back, and next time, they won't stop until they've pulled that code from your bones." Cholera nodded. "Then we better make sure they can't find us. Or it." He powered down the machine. "We bury it. Or we spread it. But we don't run anymore." She smiled, faintly. "Finally, you sound like someone from my world." Outside, the forest waited. And something in its silence sounded almost like agreement. The cabin was silent, but Elliot's breathing came in short, panic bursts. His hands twitched beneath a blanket, fists clenching around memories he couldn't let go of. Sweat beaded on his forehead. In his mind, fire rained from the sky. Not the forest fires of Ashwood, but something darker. The screams were always the same. Civilians running. Children. His work, a virus meant to disable mutating, spreading, taking lives it was never meant to touch. He saw the aftermath. Villages in flames. eyes hollowed by death. The ghost of a child holding nothing but a teddy bear and bleeding from the eyes. "Stop," he gasped in his sleep. "I didn't mean to." Then a touch, light as starlight, on his shoulder. He jolted awake, eyes wide, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "It's me," Collier said softly. The cabin was still dark, the fire burned low, casting faint shadows across the walls. She sat beside him, her presence calm, her hands resting in her lap. The glow beneath her skin had softened in the night, no longer flickering but steady, like a heartbeat that had found its rhythm again. "You were dreaming," she said. "I was remembering," Elliot replied, his voice hoarse. "There's a difference. Not always a good one." She didn't press. Instead, she waited, letting the silence stretch without judgment. "It was a long time ago," he said eventually. "I created something I thought could save lives. Something humane. Non-lethal. Disable a threat without killing. But they used it differently. Changed the delivery vector. Dropped it on a civilian center." Collier nodded slowly. "And you've carried it since." He looked at her. "Do you know what that's like? Watching your life's work turn into a death sentence for strangers." She hesitated. Then, "Yes." He blinked. "Your planet. Varial was once a garden," she said, her voice distant but steady. "We lived in harmony with the biosphere. Our culture wasn't perfect, but it was rich. Full. We were explorers, not conquerors. Scientists, artists. When war came, we didn't have the weapons to fight back. So they erased us. Not just physically. They burned our archives. Destroyed our music. Our language. Left only fragments." Elliot listened. Her voice wasn't bitter. It was mournful. Like someone trying to remember a lullaby she could no longer sing. "They took our stars from us," she whispered. "Made us ghosts." He looked at her, truly looked. And something in his chest shifted. "You're all that's left," he said. Collier nodded. "And I remember everything. I hear it in my sleep. The last broadcast before the satellites fell. The final heartbeat of my home." Elliot reached out and placed his hand over hers. For a long moment, they simply breathed. Two survivors from different wars, bound by loss, silence, and the ache of things undone. "You shouldn't have to carry it alone," he said. "And you shouldn't either." Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a whisper, as if the forest had been listening, too. They sat like that for some time, neither moving, letting the weight between them settle into something shared. Eventually, Elliot rose and stoked the fire. The flames rose higher, casting a warm glow across the cabin. He turned to Collier, his face calm but resolute. "You know, I've been hiding out here thinking I was punishing myself. That if I disappeared, maybe my mistakes would disappear too. But they don't. They grow. Like roots." She watched him carefully. "Then stop hiding. Start planting something better." He gave a dry chuckle. "You always sound like poetry when you talk." "Poetry is memory," she replied. "It helps us survive." Elliot nodded. Then looked around the cabin, the tools, the traps, the research, and saw something new. Not a bunker. Not a prison. But a place of beginning. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. "But I do know this, I'm not letting them take you. Not for science, not for war, not for any reason." Collier stood and stepped close. You don't have to protect me. Just stand beside me. I will, he said. Because you're not just the last of your kind. You're a mirror. You make me see what we could be, if we dared to remember who we are. She smiled, a quiet, tired smile, but real. Then we hold the line, she said. Elliot looked to the trees, the stars beyond them. No. We redraw it. The air was thick with silence. Not the kind that brought peace, but the kind that settled before a storm. Elliot Granger crouched low beneath the branches, mud streaked across his face, the air reeking of resin and tension. The forest around him had changed. No longer a sanctuary, it had become a weapon. He ran his fingers along the control line embedded into the bark. Every wire, every spore pod, every neuroreactive gas sac was in place. The circle was complete. The last trap, he muttered. Collier stood nearby, her armor dull beneath the gray sky. Her glow had faded to a soft pulse, like a distant memory of stars. She looked at the trees, the moss-covered stones, the makeshift devices blinking faintly in hidden places. Will it work? She asked. Elliot didn't answer right away. His body ached. A cut across his side had reopened, soaking into the edge of his coat. But he couldn't afford to stop. It'll have to, he said. These things track by breath, by heat, by pulse. So we give them what they are looking for. And when they come in, the forest breathes back. She nodded, not fully understanding but trusting him. They had less than an hour. The last two hunters were close. Collier could feel the pressure in her temples like a storm approaching. Elliot set the final release node beneath the rotting stump, fingers shaking from exhaustion. The trap was elegant in its brutality. A network of pods filled with bioreactive toxins harvested from Ashwood's most dangerous plants. A system designed to respond only to specific concentrations of CO, the kind exhaled in rapid, high-volume bursts, running, panicking, attacking. They retreated to the core shelter, little more than a stone hollow reinforced with polymer sheets and woven branches. Elliot slumped against the wall, blood soaking through his shirt. Collier tried to help, but he waved her off. I'm fine. You're not. He coughed and smiled weakly. That's what makes it believable. Moments later, the sky cracked with movement. Two shapes dropped from above, silent, armored, lethal. The final hunters had arrived. Collier reached for her power, but it faltered. Her body hadn't recovered. Her mind trembled with the weight of what was coming. Elliot reached out and squeezed her hand. Stay here. You're the reason we're still fighting. Then he stepped into the trap. He moved through the clearing like wounded prey, limping, exposed. The hunters saw him and closed in fast. One from the left, one from the right, trying to flank, as always. Predictable. The circle came alive. Spore pods hissed open. Gas bled from hidden vents. The air shifted, became heavy, toxic, intelligent. The hunters hesitated just long enough. Elliot triggered the ignition. A pulse of sound rippled out, setting off the secondary wave. The gas became flame, the spores erupted in chemical fire, the trees exhaled death. One hunter screamed, not in fear but mechanical rage, before its systems collapsed. The other staggered, weapon raised, firing blindly. A bolt struck Elliot in the chest. He hit the ground hard, but his eyes stayed open. Through blurred vision, he saw the second hunter stumbling into a tripwire laced with thermal charges. The forest exploded again. When Collier reached him, the smoke was choking, the trees burned, and the sky had turned the color of memory. She dropped to her knees beside him. Elliot. His breathing was shallow, wet. Did it work? She nodded, tears streaking through soot. They're gone. He coughed. Blood bubbled at his lips. Told you. One last trap. She reached for her energy, tried to pour it into him, to heal, to restore. He shook his head. Don't waste it. She leaned closer. You can't die. Not now. Not like this. He smiled, eyes dimming. I'm not dying, like this. I'm dying, knowing I finally used what I built, to save. From inside his coat, he pulled a data drive, slick with blood. He pressed it into her hand. This has everything. The enzyme data. My notes. My failures. My hope. She gripped it tightly. I'll protect it. He held her gaze, voice thin. Don't let them turn you into a weapon. Not them. Not even yourself. Her breath caught. Swear it. I swear. He exhaled. And did not breathe again. Collier sat there for a long time, cradling the man who had once poisoned the world and died trying to cure it. Behind her, the shelter collapsed as the fires grew. She stood, face lit by flames, holding the last of him in her hand. Ashwood burned. But something survived. The sky over Ashwood glowed with the red pulse of dawn and the fading embers of war. Smoke hung low like morning veils between the branches, and Collier stood at the edge of what remained of the forest, of the shelter, of him. The wreckage of the last hunter's ship lay broken near the clearing, its core still flickering with unstable energy. Collier knelt beside it, her hands moving quickly over alien panels, her breath steady. The ship recognized her now, not as a target, but as a survivor. She reconfigured the command interface, overriding the failsafes and redirecting its trajectory. The thrusters coughed to life with a shuddering roar. She looked back once, toward the charred remains of the lab where Elliot had made his final stand. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. She carried his data core secured at her hip. The enzyme map. The research. His warnings. And his voice, one last time in her memory. Don't let them turn you into a weapon. Not them. Not even yourself. The ship lifted off, scattering ash and soot into the air like black snow. Collier stood within it, illuminated by pale control lights. The ship's systems were set to self-destruct after reaching low orbit. She would have time to jettison herself using an emergency pod, an ancient system, but functional. She would vanish, like so many others before her. But not in silence. Above Ashwood, the ship streaked into the sky, a burning line across the clouds. In orbit, Collier activated the pod. The ship's AI warned her of fragmentation. She accepted. She didn't look back as the hunter vessel detonated behind her, erasing all trace of alien tech. Only the forest remained. Weeks passed. The seasons shifted. Rain returned. Ashwood, scorched and wounded, began to heal in quiet defiance. A boy, no older than 12, wandered from a nearby hiking trail one afternoon chasing a red fox into the trees. The deeper he went, the stranger the woods became. Old traps rusted in the underbrush. Tree bark bore carved warnings he didn't understand. And then he found it. A clearing. Small, quiet, and full of light. In its center grew a tree unlike any he'd seen. Its bark shimmered faintly with a violet hue. Its leaves were silver green, fluttering even in still air. Around it bloomed a patch of low ferns that gave off a soft bioluminescent glow. The boy, amazed, reached out and touched one of the leaves. A small cut on his finger from earlier vanished beneath his skin. No scar. No pain. He stumbled back in awe, then noticed the trunk. Someone had carved words into the smooth surface. The letters were old, but clear. Granger lived here. So that something else may live too. He didn't understand the full weight of the message. Not yet. But he would remember it. And so would others. Word spread about the healing tree in the forest. Quietly, reverently. Scientists came, but couldn't explain it. Locals guarded it. Some called it a miracle. Others, a legacy. No one ever saw Kalira again. But sometimes, during the darkest nights of summer, hikers claimed they saw lights in the sky that weren't stars. Heard whispers in the trees that didn't belong to wind. And very few said they dreamed of a woman with violet eyes and glowing skin, placing her hand on a child's forehead and whispering, "Remember." Kalira had not disappeared. She had become part of the story. And in every leaf that healed, every root that reached deeper into the earth, a piece of Elliot Granger lived on. Not as a warning, but as a beginning.